I calibrate elevator brakes for a living, and for 11 years the numbers told the truth about every building in the city until one of them started telling me about a floor that isn't there. Let me explain what I actually do, because people always picture the wrong thing. They picture a guy in a jumpsuit standing on top of a car in a dark shaft with a wrench. That happens, sure, but most of the job is data. Every elevator in a commercial building has a governor and a safety system, and every one of them gets tested on a schedule set by the state. Annual full load tests, monthly checks, continuous logging on the newer units. I work for the third-party firm the property managers hire to keep them compliant, which means I'm the person who reads the tapes. Travel time between floors, door dwell, motor amperage, brake response measured to the hundredth of a second. A healthy elevator is boring. It does the same thing 10,000 times a day, and my whole profession is built on the fact that boring is safe. The day an elevator stops being boring is the day somebody gets hurt. So I trust the logs the way a pilot trusts an altimeter. They're not opinions. A modern controller records every call, every dispatch, every door cycle, every floor arrival, and it timestamps all of it down to the millisecond. If a car is misbehaving, the log tells you before a person ever notices. I've caught worn sheave bearings from nothing but a 2/10 drift in travel time between the 4th and 5th floors of an office tower. The building manager thought I was psychic. I wasn't. I just read carefully. That's the whole trick. You read carefully, and you believe what the machine tells you, because the machine has no reason to lie and every reason built into it to be accurate. The building I want to tell you about is a mixed-use tower downtown. 26 floors. Retail and a bank branch at the bottom, offices in the middle, residential condos up top. 4 passenger cars and 1 service elevator. It's not old, built in the early 2000s, and it's not remarkable, which is exactly why what happened there took me so long to see. It was a good building, good equipment. I'd been the tech of record on it for 6 years, and in 6 years those 5 cars had never given me a single thing to worry about. The kind of account you're grateful for. You do the monthly, you file the report, you go home. The anomaly showed up in a maintenance report I almost didn't run. Car 3 had thrown a minor fault code overnight, a door reversal event, the kind of thing that happens when somebody sticks an arm in as the doors are closing. Totally routine. But the fault log gives you the full trip context around the event, so I pulled the dispatch record for that car for the previous 24 hours, just to see what it was doing when the reversal happened. Standard practice. You want to know if the car was under load, whether it was a busy period, all of it. And in the middle of the night, at 3:14 in the morning, Car 3 had registered a call to floor 14, traveled there, opened its doors for 11 seconds, closed them, and returned to the lobby. That's not strange on its own. People come home late. But the building doesn't have a 14th floor. It has a 13th and a 15th, with nothing between them, because the developer did the thing developers have done for 100 years. They skipped 13 in the numbering to make the condos easier to sell, so the button panel goes 12, then it's labeled 14, then 15, and so on. The 14th floor is physically the 13th level of the building. There is no floor in that tower that is actually numbered 14 in the controller's internal addressing. The controller doesn't know or care what the buttons say to the public. Internally, it counts real landings, 1 through 26, and it dispatches to those. There is a floor called 14 on the wall panel, but there is no landing address 14 in the machine, except there was in that log. A dispatch to internal landing 14. Doors open, doors close, at a landing address that does not exist in the car's own configuration file. I did what any competent person does with an impossible data point. I assumed I'd misread it. I pulled the raw controller dump instead of the formatted report, because formatted reports can misalign columns and turn a 15 into a 14 if a byte drops. The raw dump said the same thing. Landing 14. Travel time consistent with the real distance to that height in the shaft. Motor amperage in normal range for an empty car. Door dwell of 11 seconds, which is longer than the standard 7-second lobby dwell, but well within spec for a residential floor where someone might be fumbling for keys. Everything about the trip was perfectly, boringly normal, except that the destination was a floor the machine wasn't built to reach. My first real theory was a firmware issue. Controllers get updated, and a bad flash can corrupt the landing table, scramble the internal addresses, so the car thinks a real floor is a different number than it is. If that had happened, though, it would have happened for every trip, not one at 3:14 in the morning. I pulled a full week of dispatch data for car 3 and sat with it at my kitchen table. Every other trip in that entire week addressed a legitimate landing. Hundreds of them, all clean. Just the one, in the dead middle of the night, to a floor that isn't there. A firmware corruption doesn't correct itself for 6 days and then fire once. That's not how corrupted tables behave. They're consistent. That's the whole problem with them. So I went to the building. I told the property manager I was doing an unscheduled check on car 3's door operator, which was true enough, and I rode the car up and down and I watched the internal readout on my laptop plugged into the service port. 12, 15, 16. It counted real landings, clean and correct. I stopped it between the 13th and 15th public floors and forced it into inspection mode and crept it up the shaft by hand, watching the shaft itself through the car top inspection station, and there was exactly what there should have been. A blank stretch of concrete wall between two landing sills, the dead space that exists in every building that skips a number, a gap of a few feet of nothing, where the missing floor's height gets absorbed into the 2 floors around it. No door, no landing, no opening, just poured concrete and the guide rails running past it. I put my hand on that wall. It was solid. It was a wall. I want to be honest that at this point I was more annoyed than afraid. A ghost trip in a log is an IT problem, not a horror story. I filed it as an anomalous dispatch event, recommended a controller diagnostic, and I flagged car 3 to log verbose for the next 30 days so I'd catch it if it did anything odd again. Then I went back to my other buildings and mostly forgot about it, the way you forget about a single strange number when you have 40 other accounts that need real attention. It did it again, 11 days later. Same car, 3:14 in the morning, to the minute, landing 14. Doors open 11 seconds, doors close, return to lobby. And this time, because I'd set the car to verbose logging, I had more. Verbose mode records the car's load cell, the sensor that weighs what's inside, so the controller knows whether it's empty or full for dispatch efficiency. On the first trip, I'd had no load data. This time I did. The car had gone up empty, and it had come down carrying the equivalent of 1 adult person. I sat with that reading for a long time. The load cell is not a subtle instrument, but it's a reliable one. It's how the car knows not to move when it's overloaded. Empty going up. Roughly 160 pounds coming down. The doors had opened at a landing that doesn't exist, stayed open 11 seconds, long enough for someone to step in, and the car had descended heavier than it went up. And when it reached the lobby and opened its doors there, the load cell dropped back to 0. Whatever weight had gotten on at 14 had gotten off at the bottom, into a locked lobby, at 3 in the morning, in a building where I could pull the door access logs and prove that not one exterior door had been opened between midnight and 6. That's when I stopped treating it as an IT problem. I did the thing I should probably have done sooner, which was look at whether this was only happening to my building. I have access, through our firm's monitoring platform, to the fleet data for every unit we service. Hundreds of elevators across the region, all reporting into the same system. I can't easily read another tech's building in detail, but I can run a simple query across the whole fleet. Show me every dispatch, anywhere, to an internal landing address that doesn't exist in that car's own configuration. A phantom floor query, essentially. It should have returned nothing. A car cannot be commanded to a landing it doesn't have. The dispatch software won't even generate the call. It returned 206 results, across 31 different buildings, going back as far as our digital records went. And every single one of them was a call to the skipped floor, not random impossible numbers, the missing 13, or the missing 14 where 13 had been renumbered, whatever number that particular building had chosen to leave out of its public panel. Every building that skips a floor in its numbering had, at some point, dispatched a car to that skipped floor, always in the dead middle of the night, always with the same 11-second dwell, and where the load data existed, the same pattern held, over and over, empty going up, one person's weight coming down, 0 at the lobby, buildings I'd never set foot in, serviced by techs I'd never met, all running the identical impossible errand at the identical hour, and not one of those techs, apparently, had ever run the query that would let them see it, because why would you? You'd have to already suspect something to go looking for a floor that isn't there. I built the case carefully, the way I build every case, because I knew how it would sound. I pulled the load traces and the dispatch records and the door logs and I laid them side by side, 31 buildings, and the correlation was airtight. And then I did one more query, the one that actually broke something in me, because I'm the kind of person who has to check the last thing. I cross-referenced the dates of the phantom trips against the residential move-out records for the buildings I could get them for, the condo and apartment towers, where management tracks when a unit changes hands. In building after building, a phantom trip to the missing floor landed within a few days of a resident of that building dying. Not moving out. Dying. Natural causes mostly. The ordinary attrition of a tower full of people. An old man in 21B. A woman in her sleep on the 9th floor. A heart attack in the parking garage. And within 72 hours, always around 3:14 in the morning, a car in that building would rise empty to the floor that isn't there, hold its doors open for 11 seconds, and come back down carrying the weight of one person to a lobby nobody could enter or leave. I brought the whole thing to my supervisor. I need you to understand I did not come in raving. I came in with a spreadsheet and printed traces and a flat professional summary, the way I'd present a genuine safety defect, because on some level I was still hoping he'd point at one column and say, "That's a known artifact. We've seen it. Here's the boring explanation." He's a good engineer. He's been doing this longer than I have. I laid it out for him and I watched him read it, and he didn't say it was an artifact. He got very still, and he read it twice, and then he asked me how I'd found it, and I told him about the door reversal fault, and the verbose log, and the fleet query, and he was quiet for a while, and then he told me to close the query out and not to run it again, and to take car 3 off verbose logging and file the door reversal as resolved. I asked him why. I asked him plainly. And he didn't give me a rule handed down from some previous generation, and he didn't confess to a secret the company was keeping. He just looked genuinely frightened for the first time in the years I'd known him, and he said the thing I've thought about every day since. He said, "The cars are still passing every safety test. Every one of those 31 buildings, the equipment is perfect. Nobody living has ever been hurt in any of them. Whatever that is, it isn't a defect, and it isn't ours to fix, and the last thing you want is for it to start knowing your name because you kept pulling its records." Then he said the query I'd run was now in the system's audit trail with my login attached to it, and there was nothing either of us could do about that, and he was sorry, and he told me to go home. I did go home, and I closed the query, and I took the car off verbose, and I filed the fault as resolved, and I tried to do the thing my supervisor was really telling me to do, which was to unknow it, to go back to reading tapes and believing the machine and letting boring be safe. For a couple of months it almost worked. I serviced my buildings. I read clean logs. I stopped thinking about 314 quite so often. Then, on a Tuesday night, my phone buzzed with an automated alert from the monitoring platform. I have alerts set on all my accounts. A normal thing. They ping me when a car faults so I can schedule service. But this alert wasn't a fault. It was a custom alert, and I know for a fact I never built it, because I would remember building an alert with that trigger condition. The trigger was a text string. It was set to notify me anytime the fleet logged a dispatch to a non-existent landing. Someone, or something, had built me an alert to tell me every time it happened, using my login, in my account, so I would always know. The alert has gone off 9 times since. 9 buildings, 9 skipped floors, 9 trips at 3:14 in the morning, and every time my phone lights up in the dark and shows me the address and the landing that isn't there, and the 11-second dwell, and I lie in bed, and I don't open the app, because I already know what the load trace will say. Empty up, 1 person down, 0 at the lobby. I still do the job. I read the tapes, and I believe the machine, because I have to, because the alternative is not believing any of it, and I can't work that way. My buildings are boring. My buildings are safe. I've checked the elevator in my own building 100 times now, a modest 6-story walk-up with 1 old hydraulic car, and it has no skipped floor at all. The developer, whoever they were, numbered every landing honestly, 1 through 6. Nothing left out. Nowhere for a car to go that isn't there. I used to think that made me safe. A building with no missing floor has no phantom to dispatch to. But I've started to wonder what the missing floor actually is in the buildings that have one. Whether it was ever really about the numbering at all, or whether the skip number is just the door the thing uses because we left it standing open, a landing address we told the machine to hold a space for, and then agreed among ourselves to pretend wasn't there. We built the gap on purpose. 13 floors of concrete with a hollow left in the count, in tower after tower, all over every city, because we didn't want to say a number out loud. And something has been using that hollow, patiently, 1 resident at a time, at 3 in the morning, for as long as we've been building them. My building doesn't have one. I keep telling myself that, but I've been in this trade 11 years, and I know how the work actually goes. And I know that the next time I take a job, or move to a new place, or ride a car I haven't read the logs on, the odds are that building will have skipped a number somewhere, the way almost all of them do. There will be a floor in the count that the panel pretends isn't there, and the machine will know its real address even if the buttons don't. And at 3:14 in the morning, when everyone who lives there is asleep, and trusting the boring safe equipment to stay boring, a car will go up empty to a floor that doesn't exist, and come back down carrying someone home. I check the load cell readings now on every car I service. All of them. It's not in my scope and my reports don't ask for it, but I check, empty and full, every trip that looks even slightly long, because it's the one number that told the truth when everything else stayed boring. My supervisor was right that it isn't a defect and it isn't ours to fix, but he was wrong about one thing, or maybe he just couldn't bring himself to say it. It already knows my name. It built me the alert, so I'd never be able to stop watching. And I've started to think that's not a threat. I've started to think it's a courtesy, that when it finally sends a car up empty in whatever building I'm sleeping in, and it comes back down at 3:14 carrying 1 more person's weight to a lobby no one can enter or leave, my phone will light up in the dark first, with an alert I never built, showing me the address I already know, and the 11 seconds the doors will hold open, waiting, the way they've waited for everyone else, so that I'll have time to decide whether to get in on my own.